Hey everybody, hope everyone had a happy new year. Mine was rather productive, spent a lot of time down in the shop. I just got this very large quantity of Monokote in the mail today. There's obviously a lot more than it's necessary to cover this airplane. But in the meantime, I did have some scraps laying around that I was able to get some covering done. So, as you can see, so far it has turned out just beautiful. There's actually quite a lot that goes into covering a situation like this. Let me see if I can get this in a little bit better angle here without breaking anything. There we go. So it might not make sense how I do it, and I don't care, it's just how I do it. We'll get up there in a minute. So back here, just the red for the stab and where it wraps around up top for the fuse and the strip that goes up the dorsal fin. So not counting the elevator halves, but just the stab in this area here, there's 14 pieces of covering. That's right, you heard me. 14 pieces. Now, by looking at it, you really can't tell. I mean, the camera might pick up where you can see pieces that were put in, but I extremely doubt it. I mean, that just turned out so nice. So the reason there's so many pieces is because in a scale type affair like this, you know, you got a round fillet around the stab. You got this small piece right here where the fuselage blends into the tail section. You just can't do this all in one piece of covering, or even two or three. So let's go into some detail on just how I did that. You'll notice this line right here is jagged and, you know, not very straight. That's fine, because when the red is put on to where it goes to the dorsal fin, it's going to come underneath the stab, probably about to here, and then run down to the tail. So that doesn't have to be very straight since I'm putting on another piece of covering. So the order that I did this is I started off by cutting 1/2-inch strips of covering, or maybe, yeah, about 1/2-inch strips. And I got to put them in the jam areas right here. So where the fuselage meets the tail, you got to cover that jam. It's kind of like when you're painting a car or an airplane or whatever. You do all the jams first, all the, you know, hard to reach places. And then where it wraps up around the top, there's probably 1, 2, 3 pieces up in here to really get that angle right. And when you get really close to it, you can see the different pieces of covering, but I'm really zoomed in on it. And I also haven't really heated it down very much either. So you got to go around the entire perimeter. Let's flip this back over. And then up top here, I put a strip right here, and then a strip that ran all the way up there. Now once those strips are in, now I can go ahead and cover this area here. This is where the rudder comes down to. And obviously the top and bottom of the stab come up and match here. And this rear section here is put on, and it comes up to the stab areas here. So there's a lot of seams, but you really can't see them because it all depends on how well you hide them. And as long as your colors, as long as your seams are uniform, they're nice, they're neat, they're not that noticeable. Okay? That's always been kind of a pet peeve for people, is they don't like Monokote because there's seams. Well, it all depends on how you do it. I'm sure some are wondering why, hold on a minute, why I've only covered the back portion of the fuselage. Well, there's a reason for that. I've always done it this way. So you can see the bottom of the fuselage is covered, as well as the center section fillet area. And when it comes back to here, from here back is completely finished, minus this area up here, because there is going to be some red that comes down the side. But I always cover like this and I make a seam right underneath the stab. And it's just how I've always done it. Normally when you do the side of the fuselage, you run one piece continuous and then run it all the way back here. Well, I just don't do it that way. Is there going to be a seam there? Yes. Is it going to be visible? No, not really. Because once you flip this thing over, and when it's sitting down, you're just not going to see that. And I think it looks good. Probably one of the most difficult things to do, besides the covering portion itself, is figuring out your corners, your jams, where you have different colors that meet. You have to figure out what color to use in your jam area. So really study your color scheme very well, because obviously this area here, from this point going down at an angle under the stab, this is all going to be red, and the dorsal fin is going to be blue. So you have a choice. Do you want to make this jam blue? No, because then you have no blue here. This transitions into white. So now the white will come right down to the red like it's supposed to, and then the blue will come down to the red like it's supposed to, which is why this jam area is done in red first. So you gotta do a little bit of thinking, a little bit of, figuring out before you get right into it. So take another look in here. When the light hits on it just perfect, you can kind of see where the covering is seamed together. But I mean, look at that joint. That's really nice. And I just love Monokote. It lays down so nice. Most of the people that hate this stuff, or say Monokote is worse over Ultracote, blah, 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 is just because they don't know how to use it. Now, I personally love Monokote. I would choose it over any other film as far as, a shiny film. I'm not talking about fabric or anything else like that. Because Monokote is the strongest, it can take the most heat, and over time it lasts. Ultracote is easier to work with, don't get me wrong. In corners like this and going around corners here, Ultracote is going to be easier to use, but it's also not as durable of a material. And over time, Ultracote flakes and gets really brittle, where Monokote seems to hold up better. As you can see, for how difficult everybody says Monokote is to use, and you can't go around corners very well, well, I beg to differ. You just got to know how to use it. All right, let's turn this thing around and take a look at the center section. Stand by. Alright, I know there was a lot of interest in how I was going to cover this area, and I know a lot of people wanted videos. This did not go extremely well. The end result I am okay with. I wouldn't say that I'm pleased, but I'm content. It was just a chore. So a video would have unfortunately had probably a lot of swearing and, throwing things, and, just didn't feel like that would have been necessary. So let's go ahead and start out how I did it. So I posted just a picture of the beginning of this process, which is the area where the exact transition from the fuselage to the center section or fairing. I put a 1/2-inch strip of Monokote all the way around. So then from that point, now I have an area up top for the fuselage covering to blend into, and also the center section covering to blend into. Instead of trying to do it in one shot, which is very difficult, it is possible. I just don't have the patience for it. So other than that, let's see if we can flip this around to yet another angle without breaking things. Okay. So just like the full-scale airplane, the fairing is a removable piece, and when it's removed, that's where the full scale you would get all the wing mounting locations to disassemble the airplane. Now obviously this is all solid, it doesn't remove, but it makes it easier to cover if you do it accurately. And by that I mean it's done in pieces. There's 1, 2, 3 pieces, which makes it easier to cover versus trying to do this whole section. You do it in separate pieces. It gives that illusion of there's 1, 2, 3 removable sections, so just like the full-scale airplane. Now covering these areas here was pretty easy. Just like this area up here, just using the small trim iron, setting a piece of covering in there, starting in the center and working your way out like this. That is the easiest way to do it, and it worked out nice. And the same down here. Now this is a very difficult situation to cover, especially with Monokote. Even though I love Monokote, this is not where it shines. Doing concave surfaces like this that not only bend this way, but also this way, it's very difficult to persuade this covering to do that. It takes a lot of patience, and I did it. I originally did this side first, and I tried another method that I know people have talked about, which is cutting the covering into half-inch strips and running them all the way across like this. And it made it easier to do, but I didn't like the seams because you could tell there was strips in it. I really didn't like it. So I covered the other side, just taking my time with the trim iron and just starting in the center and just kind of working my way around. And it turned out well, so I pulled the covering off this side and redid this side. So this is a solid piece of covering from here to here, and as you can see, it turned out really nice. It takes some time, but it worked out nice. The front, very similar to the tail section, did take several pieces, and this doesn't look as good, but I'm okay with that because this is an area where if I do develop wrinkles, I don't want to be afraid to put a heat gun in there and be afraid of the covering separating. So there's quite a few pieces in there, and then this very top part here actually has 2 strips that run down instead of trying to make one piece and wrinkle it around like that, because it's concave and it does a contour like this. So it's a very difficult situation to achieve with Monokote. But by doing it this way, it does look good. It really does. And both sides, this side actually turned out better. There's always one side that's better than the other, you notice that? And it still needs to be polished and cleaned up. But it turned out pretty well. So let's flip the fuselage over and take a peek at the bottom, shall we? Before we get too more involved into this, my shout out of the week or video, however you want to call it. This is RC Tail Dragon. There's his information right up there, just in case you missed it. This guy, he builds not necessarily older type airplanes, but kind of old school type airplanes from modern kits. He just built a Telemaster, which I believe was an older Hobby Lobby kit. And in this video, he's building, I think it's a 72-inch Tailorcraft from Alien Kits, which is sold by SIG. And just, old school building. I love having this playing in the shop, so definitely check out his channel. He really specializes in just old school building, and I like that. So definitely check him out. Now this area here, I love covering stuff like this because this is a contour. This is a a nice contour. It's not concave. Covering is much easier to stretch around corners than it is to push it into a situation like that. So this turned out very well. As you can see, there are several pieces in there, which is fine. If this was supposed to be replicating a composite style airplane, and this was going to be a competition airplane that was going to be judged, then I would do all this with a lot less covering. I would actually do it with 1, 2, 3 pieces instead of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. I did it in so many pieces just because it makes it easier on me. And as you can tell through the camera, it's not very noticeable how many pieces there are, as long as you keep your seams nice and clean. And as I said before, covering areas like this on the bottom side, it doesn't get any easier than that. because you can tack your entire piece of covering on one side, then adding pressure, pulling it, and heating it. It's so much easier to heat around corners than it is to go, down and inside like that. But that turned out really nice. I'm extremely pleased. I haven't cut out the openings for my access for my wing bolts yet. I did get a few comments about how that didn't look very well, and there were other better ways to do it, and I agree. But these are actually functional. Once these holes are there, these are functional, and I'll tell you how. So when this engine cowling is on there, it is tight to the fuselage, okay? And I noticed that there's a hollow cavity in here that goes up into the fuselage. So now let's think about this. When this engine is mounted, it's going to have plenty of cooling air coming in the front, but where's the exit air going to go? Well, now that I have those 4 holes on the bottom side of the fuselage, now the air can pass through the front of the cowl and then go into this tunnel and exit out here. So this now becomes an air exit. So it kind of gave some purpose to the whole thing. Pretty cool, huh? So that turned out to be, functional. I was hoping to have more covered for this video, but like I said, I ran out of larger pieces of usable scrap covering and just got this in today. I had to crack open one of the rolls because for those that are familiar with Monokote, nothing smells better than a freshly opened roll of Monokote. Excuse me. That just has such a wonderful smell. Oh my god. If I could get that into like a cologne form, holy mackerel. Love the smell of Monokote. Your other coverings just don't have that. That's the best. So, besides this, today, in fact, I just recently got back from seeing my good buddy Jim Gibney, and I kind of came home with something. And there it is. He had expressed some interest in selling his Top Flight P-40. This is the giant scale. And when he said, I can make you a good deal, that's where it all went downhill. I'm a sucker for a good deal. I have flown just about every make and model of a P-40 as far as, kit manufacturers and sizes. I've flown them all. Byron, Yellow, Top Flight, Zeroli. I've flown them all. But I've never owned one. I've never had one in my hangar. And now I do. It's been around the block a few times. It's got some wear and tear on it, which is fine. It's got a DLE 55 in it. Well broken in, good running engine. Robart gear. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty excited about that. Of course, I needed another airplane like I need a bullet to the head, but like I said, I can't turn down a good deal, and it's a nice airplane, and I'll definitely have fun with it. So thanks again, Jimmy, for the good deal. I'll make sure it's put to good use, and it'll be at the flying events in the future, I'm sure. If we're gonna have flying events, who knows how freaking wishy-washy this world is right now. It's unbelievably stupid. But that's beside the point. So now that I got my stock of covering, what's next? I really need to do some more work on the cowl to make sure that I have the cowl fitting to the fuselage exactly how I want it before I sheet this. I'm not going to mount it until after I get an engine and everything for it, and I'll figure out where I'm going to put my mounts. I just want to make sure the cowl is going to fit over the fuselage just the way I want it before I put any more covering on it. So I figure for now I can go ahead and cover the fin, get the dorsal fin covered, and I can probably put the red stripes on there. And basically the tail section of the airplane will be finished. Now, I haven't decided yet if I'm going to piece together the covering for the sides. I'm trying to move this without putting the camera down. Hold on. There we go. So the full-scale airplane, I like to use scale accuracy as an excuse for my laziness. You know, I'm looking at this going, you know, this is a pretty easy thing to cover. But the difficult portion of it, by making it one piece, is going to be around this area here. So I'm trying to figure out if I just want to cut a template to the exact size of the fuselage, get all my cutouts, or if I want to do it in a couple different pieces. And the reason for doing it in a couple pieces being somewhat accurate is because the full-scale airplane is a metal covered fuselage. So of course there's pieces. So having a couple seams in the proper locations is actually realistic. So that's just one way to look at it. You know, just being lazy, but you know, sometimes laziness is actually accurate. So you can kind of see what I mean right here. It's still kind of dirty from iron smudges, but there's quite a bit of covering in this area, so you can kind of see the seams in there. But that's because there's a lot of covering there. I don't want any separation here. I want this to be a strong, nice strong area. Plus, once this is all covered, I'm going to have a black pinstripe that's going to go all the way around the fairing. Because on the full scale there was like a piece of, like almost like just like a rubber strip that went between the fairing and the fuselage to prevent it from scuffing up the paint. So that is where we're at. Everything is so far ahead of schedule, it's crazy. But once I get in the mood for covering and I start, I typically don't stop. I just keep going. So we'll see how much I get done tonight, or if I do anything at all. I might start tearing into this P-40 and seeing if there's anything really to do on it. But yeah, that's where we're at. Alright, if anybody has any questions, let me know. I know I promised to do a couple videos of actually covering things, but by the time I get myself into the mood to actually do covering, grabbing all my camera equipment, getting things set up, trying to figure out, you know, what to say and what to shoot, what not to shoot, it just usually doesn't happen. For me to get in the mood for covering, it is a spur of the moment type deal. Like, okay, I'm in the mood to plug in the iron and let's go do it. Oh, I know in the past I have talked about using iron socks, not using iron socks. This airplane, I decided to do the whole airplane using some kind of a protection on the iron, which I normally don't do. But this time I decided let's just do an entire airplane and see if it's worth it for me. So all I've done is taken an old 100% cotton t-shirt. That's the important part. Don't use a 50-50 cotton polyester. You want 100% cotton. And just cut it into a square, pulled it around the iron, zip tied it off. And the reason the clamps are on there is because I've been using this particular piece for a while, is it's cotton. With it exposed to a bunch of heat, it's going to start expanding and stretching. So now I have to kind of, you know, pinch and pull and tighten the sock around the iron, and that's what these clamps are for, so I can keep it nice and taut, because you don't want it to move around. And eventually I've gone through, probably, you know, 2 or 3 of these so far just on this project, because usually it burns a hole through the tip, because it gets hot. The downside to using any kind of protection over your iron is you lose the controllability of really exact heat. And what I mean by that is, in order for this to be functional, you have the iron on high. I mean, it's as hot as it can go, so that way you get plenty of heat going through the sock or t-shirt or wherever you want. So you kind of lose a little bit of control on your heat settings. But I will say, on the areas like the stab, I do notice it does look better. Okay, you don't get as much. it's really hard to explain, but I can tell the difference. It does look better. So other than that, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there to let you know that I am doing this entire project using that method on the iron. And when I'm done, I'll decide if I'm going to continue with it or not. So, alright everybody, I will talk at you later. I'm going to get some work done, and I think pizza just came in the front door, so I am hungry. Later.